Dad gave my entire college fund to my brother and said, "He deserves it more." I just packed my old bags quietly. 6 months later, they begged me to come home the day I found out wasn't some dramatic, screaming match like you see in movies. No. It was worse because it was quiet. Cold. Almost casual. I remember standing in our living room, the air stale from the summer heat, the smell of Dad's coffee burning on the warmer. I was grinning like a fool, clutching the acceptance letter from my dream college. 4 years of staying out of trouble, grinding through school, working weekends to keep busy, and it had all led to this. Mom barely looked up from her crossword puzzle. Dad didn't even stand up from his recliner. He just sipped his coffee and said, "Yeah, about that. You're not going." At first I laughed. I thought he was kidding. A bad joke, maybe. He and Mom had always said there was a college fund. Since I was 12, it had been the one promise they repeated every birthday, every report card ceremony, every awkward family dinner. "You work hard, son, and we'll make sure you get to college." I worked hard. I stayed out of trouble when others didn't. I said no to parties, skipped vacations, and told myself that if I kept my head down, the payoff would come. And now, staring at them, my letter trembling slightly in my hands, all I got was a shrug. "It's all gone," Dad said. "We gave it to Evan." Evan. My younger brother. Evan, who had never passed a class without cheating. Evan, who wrecked 2 cars by the time he turned 17. Evan, who could charm the socks off anyone for long enough to avoid real consequences. I felt my mouth open, but no words came out. Dad leaned back in his chair, stretching like he just finished a long day's work instead of shattering my world. "He deserves it more," he said. "He's got potential. He just needs a little help to get serious. You'll figure something out." I wish I could tell you I screamed. That I fought. That I demanded to know how they could do this to me after everything. But I didn't. I just stood there, feeling my heart crack in slow motion, realizing that all those years of sacrifice had been invisible to them. Meaningless. I walked upstairs without another word, each step heavier than the last. I found my old duffel bag, the same one I used for soccer tournaments in middle school, stuffed it with a few changes of clothes, my battered laptop, and the little bit of cash I had saved up from my after-school jobs. No one tried to stop me. Mom didn't lift her head. Dad didn't move from his chair. I guess Evan was out somewhere, probably celebrating his new life with my future. When I stepped out onto the porch, the cicadas buzzing loudly in the humid air, I realized I didn't even know where I was going. But it didn't matter. I knew one thing for certain. I was never coming back. I slept in my car that first night. It wasn't a plan. Honestly, there was no plan. Just a numb, autopilot version of me driving aimlessly until my old Civic's gas light flickered on. I pulled into a Walmart parking lot, leaned the seat back, and stared at the cracked roof fabric, feeling smaller than I ever had before. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I kept thinking maybe Mom would call. Maybe Dad would at least send a text, something, anything. But my phone stayed dark. Not a single missed call. Not a single message. The next few days blurred into one long stretch of canned soup, job boards, and sleeping with one hand on the door lock. I pawned my old Xbox for gas money. I picked up day labor where I could, lifting furniture for moving companies, sweeping dusty warehouses for cash under the table. Everywhere I went, it felt like the world could smell the desperation on me. Still, a tiny ember inside me wouldn't let go. I kept thinking about that moment, Dad saying Evan deserved it more, and instead of giving up, it ignited something. A quiet anger. Not the kind that makes you punch walls. The kind that makes you build something with your bare hands just to prove you exist. I found a flyer taped to the window of a beat-up coffee shop, space for rent, cheap. No questions asked? It was a shoebox, barely bigger than a storage unit, tucked behind a crumbling strip mall. But it had 4 walls, a roof, and an outlet to charge my phone. The landlord, a gruff woman named Connie, didn't even blink when I said I didn't have first and last month's rent ready yet. just said. You hustle, you stay. And so I hustled. I spent my days working whatever jobs I could find, and my nights sketching out ideas on scraps of paper, ways I could build something that no one could take from me. I didn't have a college degree, but I had hands that could work, a mind that refused to quit, and absolutely nothing left to lose. I started selling refurbished furniture, dumpster finds I cleaned up, repainted, and posted online. It wasn't glamorous, but people bought them. Sometimes fast. Sometimes for more than I dared hope. I was still living off ramen and dollar store peanut butter, but slowly, a flicker of hope began to push back the dark. And I kept quiet about it all. No social media posts. No calls home. No reaching out to people who might ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. I wanted to grow this thing in the dark, where no one could stomp it out before it had the chance to breathe. Meanwhile, a few states away, Evan was already making headlines, but not the good kind. First it was whispers. A neighbor from my old town sent me a message. Hey, your brother got in some trouble at school? Then a local news article popped up. College freshman suspended after fraternity vandalism incident. The headline sat there, smug and ugly on my cracked screen. I clicked through, heart pounding. And there he was, Evan, caught in a blurry photo, grinning like a fool in front of a wrecked student lounge, spray paint can still dangling from his hand. The very boy who deserved it more. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just closed the article, turned my phone off, and got back to work. Because by then, I understood something important. They had bet everything on the wrong son. And soon, they were going to realize it. It happened 6 months to the day after I left. I didn't even realize it at first. I was sanding down an old coffee table, headphones in, the smell of varnish thick in the air. My phone was buried in my backpack, forgotten for hours at a time, like it always was these days. But when I finally pulled it out to check the time, I saw them, missed calls. First 1. Then 2. Then 8. All from the same people who had watched me walk out without so much as a goodbye. Mom. Dad. Even Evan. I stared at the screen for a long minute. Half of me wanted to block the numbers outright, toss the phone into a storm drain, and pretend they never existed. But curiosity won out. I swiped open the latest voicemail. It was Mom's voice, small and shaking. Sweetheart, we need to talk. Please. Things are bad. Just call us back, okay? We miss you. We miss you. The words felt foreign. Like she was speaking another language. I sat back on the concrete floor of my tiny shop, the one I had built with my own 2 hands, piece by piece, and listened to the next message. Dad, gruff and awkward. Listen, son, it's time we, put the past behind us. Your brother's had a rough patch. The family needs you. The family needs you. It was almost funny, if it hadn't been so pathetic. I scrolled further, finding the most desperate one of all, Evan himself. Bro. I screwed up, okay? I know you're mad. But can you just come home for a little while? Please? Mom's freaking out. Dad's losing it. We need you, man. The boy who deserved it more. The golden child. Begging. I didn't call back. I didn't text. Instead, I spent that night polishing every piece of furniture I had ready for the weekend's market. I stayed up past midnight, humming along to the soft music in my earbuds, the rhythmic scrape of sandpaper against wood more comforting than any memory of home had ever been. The next morning, I opened Instagram out of sheer habit, and there it was. My old town's local news had posted an update. Former student expelled after financial scandal, police investigating. Evan's face again, but this time no smile. The article explained what I already knew in my gut. After getting suspended, Evan spiraled. Bad choices piled on top of bad choices. Student loans blown on parties. Fake GoFundMe pages set up and exposed. Friends he thought would cover for him turning him in instead. The Golden Boy's empire had crumbled, and with it, the last illusions my parents clung to. Now they needed a new savior. And somehow, after everything, after stealing my future and handing it to someone who lit it on fire, they thought it could still be me. The funny thing is, I didn't even feel angry anymore. Just free. They were reaching out to someone who didn't exist anymore. The obedient son. The safety net. The quiet backup plan. That person had packed an old duffel bag and disappeared 6 months ago. And he was never coming back. I didn't rush my answer. In fact, I didn't answer at all, not at first. Over the next few days, the calls kept coming. Mom switched tactics, sending long texts filled with old pictures, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, vacations where we all wore matching t-shirts. Like nostalgia alone could erase everything they'd done. Dad, less subtle, left voicemail after voicemail, each angrier than the last. How dare you ignore your own family? After all we did for you. Your brother's your blood, for God's sake. Evan even tried guilt. Come on, man. You can't just leave us like this. You're better than that. Better than what? Better than a family that only remembered my name when they needed saving? Each message was a rope, thrown across a chasm they had carved themselves, hoping I'd be desperate enough to grab hold. But I wasn't desperate anymore. I was thriving. By then, my little furniture business wasn't so little. I had regular customers. A feature in the local paper had brought in new orders every week. People actually respected me, not because of what I could do for them, but because of what I built. With no college fund. No handouts. No safety net. Just me. The thought of going back to that house, sitting at that same battered kitchen table where Dad had once told me I wasn't going anywhere anyway, made my stomach turn. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was done. So, one evening, I finally answered a call. Not to explain. Not to fight. Just to close the door. Mom's voice was breathless with hope. Honey? Oh, thank God. We've been so worried. We just want to talk, that's all. Maybe you can come by this weekend? I waited for her to finish. Then I spoke, my voice low and calm. No. A sharp silence crackled across the line. Mom tried to recover. What do you mean, no? I'm not coming back, I said. Not for a visit. Not for a talk. Not for anything. Sweetheart, please. We're family. I smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. No. You were a family when it was convenient. Now you're just people I used to know. I heard her choke on a sob, but I didn't waver. You made your choice when you gave my future away like spare change, I said. And now I'm making mine. Before she could respond, before the tears and apologies and promises could come pouring out, I ended the call. I stared at the screen for a second, then turned the phone off. It felt lighter in my hand. Like cutting the last thread of a life that had been dragging behind me like a broken kite. I stepped out onto the porch of my tiny rented shop turn home. The sun was setting, streaking the sky with gold and crimson. Warm air carried the smell of fresh-cut lumber and the soft hum of traffic. It smelled like freedom. I stood there a long while, letting it all sink in. I wasn't the boy who had waited years for their approval. I wasn't the safety net for their bad decisions. I was me, standing on solid ground of my own making. And as I turned, heading back inside to the life I had built without them, I realized something. The past wasn't something I needed to run from anymore. It was something I had survived. And survival, quiet, stubborn, beautiful survival, was the best revenge of all. The thing about walking away is, you expect it to feel like a battle. You brace for guilt, second thoughts, regret gnawing at you in the middle of the night. But none of that came. All I felt was quiet. Not the sharp, bitter kind. The good kind. The kind that feels like standing in an open field after a storm, breathing air that's finally clean. For years, I thought love meant sacrifice, shrinking myself smaller and smaller so they'd have more space. Giving until there was nothing left but the hope they'd notice. But real love doesn't ask you to disappear. It doesn't hand your dreams to someone else and call it family. I didn't owe them an explanation. I didn't owe them a second chance. I owed it to myself to be free. And that's exactly what I chose. If you're listening to this, and you're where I was, standing at that crossroads, wondering if you should stay loyal to people who wouldn't blink if you disappeared, hear me clearly. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not cruel for walking away from people who only remember your worth when they're desperate. You are not broken because you got tired of proving you deserved love. You are enough, even if they never said it. Especially if they never said it. And sometimes, the greatest act of love you can give yourself is to let go of the ones who made you doubt you ever deserved it. I didn't chase updates. But life has a funny way of bringing news to your doorstep, even when you don't ask for it. A few months after that final call, I heard through an old neighbor that things at home had unraveled fast. The debts Evan racked up didn't magically disappear when he dropped out. The college fund, the one Dad had emptied for him, was long gone. And the embarrassment? It stuck around longer than any of them expected. Dad had to sell his truck. Mom took a second job at the grocery store on the edge of town. Evan, well, he bounced from one bad decision to another, still convinced the world owed him something. They tried to hold the facade together, but you could only paper over cracks for so long before the whole house crumbles. And me? I was too busy sanding tables, signing new contracts, expanding the tiny business that grew into something real, something solid. No gloating. No revenge. Just peace. The sweetest sound in the world. It's strange, the things you notice when you're free. The mornings feel different. Not rushed. Not heavy. Just quiet, the kind of quiet where you can actually hear your own thoughts again. I rented a better place, small but clean, with a little patch of grass out back where I could sit and watch the world go by. No one shouting down the stairs. No backhanded comments at dinner. Just me, breathing without apology. The business grew faster than I ever expected. Word of mouth, mostly. One customer would tell a friend, and they'd tell two more. Soon, I wasn't just scraping by. I was making real money, not flashy, not headline-worthy, but enough to pay the bills comfortably, enough to start saving, enough to finally lift my head and look toward a future that felt like mine. I started getting regulars, people who came not just for the furniture, but for the person behind it. One couple, Mr. and Mrs. Harris, stopped by one afternoon to pick up a custom table. They smiled, shook my hand, and said, "You should be proud. You're building something real. That matters." And it hit me harder than I expected. Because for the first time, someone saw me, not as a backup plan, not as a last resort, but as someone who mattered because of what he chose to become. I didn't have to prove anything anymore. Not to my family. Not to strangers. Not even to myself. I was already enough. Without the college fund. Without the empty promises. Without them. Everything they tried to hold over my head, their approval, their money, their love, it didn't own me anymore. It never did. They just made me think it did for a little while. The funny thing is, freedom doesn't feel like fireworks. It doesn't come with some grand movie moment where you throw your arms in the air and scream into the sky. It's quieter than that. Softer. But when it settles in your bones, you know you'll never let it go again. Freedom looks like a slow Sunday morning. Drinking bad coffee out of a chipped mug in a workshop that smells like sawdust and hope. It's picking up the phone and realizing you don't have to answer it just because someone demands you to. It's walking through a store and buying yourself something small. Not because you need it, but because you want it, without a second thought or guilt gnawing at your gut. It's laughing, real, belly-deep laughing, without glancing over your shoulder to see if someone's going to cut it short. I started making friends who didn't know my past. People who didn't carry the old expectations like chains around their necks. I started dreaming again. Not in the desperate way I used to, clinging to someday, like a life raft, but in the way that feels possible, solid, breathing right there in front of you. Dreaming of buying my own building. Of expanding the shop. Of teaching other kids, the ones everyone gave up on, how to build something with their hands and believe in it. And somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. I stopped needing them to see me. Because the truth is, people who only loved you when you were useful to them, they were never really your family to begin with. Family isn't just blood. Family is who shows up. Family is who claps for you when no one else does, even if the clapping is just them standing quietly in your corner, holding space for your dreams. I don't know what Evan's doing now. I don't know if Dad still sits in that old recliner, staring at the TV, pretending he didn't throw away his real legacy. I don't know if Mom still glances at my empty seat during holidays, wondering when I'll walk back through the door like nothing happened. And honestly, I don't care. I have my own table now. My own place to sit. And when I look around at the life I built, the friends, the customers, the quiet peace of knowing I chose myself, I don't see them missing. I just see me. Finally. Fully. Free. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't have to stay where you're not valued. You don't have to bleed yourself dry to earn love that should have been freely given. Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is simply walk away. And keep walking. I didn't get the life I thought I would have. I got something better. A life that's mine. A future they'll never touch. A peace they'll never understand. And that's enough.